ドラゴンパンチ TV。
Famous among fighting game enthusiasts from all over the world, Katsuhiro Harada stands as an icon in the world of gaming, renowned for his visionary leadership as the director of the Tekken series. With a career spanning over 30 years, Harada's journey reflects the evolution of 3D fighting games, from their humble beginnings to becoming a global phenomenon. As the driving force behind Tekken, he has not only helped shape the fighting game genre, but also left a permanent mark on the entire gaming industry. Though his journey has had many bumps in the road, his endeavors produce many fruitful results. In this video, we'll discuss his beginnings at Namco, the challenges he faced in game development, and how he became the face of Tekken. This is the story of Katsuhiro Harada. Katsuhiro Harada was born on June 10, 1970 in Osaka, Japan, and grew up in the Nara Prefecture. He was the youngest out of 3 children. Since both his parents were civil servants, they had high expectations of him, especially since he was their only son. They wanted him to represent the family in a positive light and find a stable career as a salaryman. Because video games were stigmatized in their infancy, his parents forbade him from having a video game console. He would frequently sneak out to play games at his local arcade, but he would often be caught and forced to leave. Besides video games, he also had an interest in martial arts in his youth. When he was in elementary school, he learned both karate and taekwondo from a specialized teacher. He would even practice judo with his father in their spare time. He credited this as an important life experience. This experience taught him that real-life fighting is quote-unquote no joke. In an interview in 2019, he was asked about how fighting games compare to real-life fights. He said the following:
I learned a number of things there, such as that in a real-life physical altercation, the biggest factor is truly weight. You just can't overcome weight and reach. If we're honest about it, there are a lot of situations where technique isn't really going to get you anywhere at all. I grew to understand that there was a top to our world, which is one that is full of death. Because of this, I stopped using any sort of violence in real life. This was an incredibly valuable thing to learn.
Harada would later go on to attend Waseda University in Shinjuku, Tokyo. This university was also attended by Tomonobu Itagaki, who would go on to create the Dead or Alive series. During his time there, he attended a few Chinese language courses, but he found them to be very difficult. He would later graduate with a degree in psychology, which would play a major role in landing a job in the gaming industry. With the job market waiting for him, it was time for Harada to look for employment. He applied to many big video game companies such as Capcom, Sega, Taito, and Square. He eventually landed a job with Namco as a sales representative. This would be a perfect fit for him since he had an interest in human behavior. He coordinated events at one of Namco's arcades called Shinjuku Playmax. At the arcade, he hosted Street Fighter II tournaments and observed the habits of the customers. He would use those observations to garner feedback from them, and as a result, broke Namco's record for first-year arcade sales. His hard work would not go unnoticed, as Namco's president at the time saw his work ethic and gave him an award of commendation. This would serve as a platform for Harada to grow within the company and eventually have a hand in game development. The first game he would be involved with would have a long-lasting impact on his career. Harada's time working at the arcade was an invaluable experience for him. After talking with customers about what they liked and disliked about the games they played, he realized that he could use that feedback to make his ideal game. His first major role in game development was as an advisory consultant for a brand new fighting game. At first it was an experiment with 3D models, but developed into an actual game after extensive research. Namco's prior attempt at making a fighting game was an obscure arcade game called Knuckleheads, released in 1992. They wanted to move away from 2D fighting games and make something akin to Virtua Fighter with their own understanding of high polygon technology. There were many names for this new game. The initial title for it was Kamui, or Power of God. However, it was already trademarked and the team needed to find another suitable title. In EGM issue 65, the game was listed as Rave War. After some time, the team found the perfect name. Tekken, meaning Iron Fist in Japanese, was chosen because it was easier to say for a global audience. Along with Harada, there were a few animators and programmers who worked on Virtua Fighter assisting with this project. While having experienced team members was important, the biggest challenges were making the game look fluid and play functionally. Something that the first Tekken game was notorious for was its touch of death combos. Harada admitted that the game was developed based on how it felt, and not with numerical conversion and calculation. Because of the challenge of creating 8 characters with different fighting styles, it was hard to produce something that was competitively viable. Harada was quoted as saying the following:
"We just used our senses. There was no theory at the time. In that sense, Tekken 1 isn't really a fighting game. It should be called a human body action game. They have abilities, and they hit each other, but it's not really a martial arts game."
It got a release in Japanese arcades in September of 1994, and the rest of the world in December of that year. Though the game was profitable, it wasn't too popular in Japanese arcades. It fared much better once it was released on Sony's PlayStation. It did better due to Namco's relationship with Sony, and because there weren't many games like it at the time. It sold over 1.7 million units worldwide, and was well received by fans and critics alike. Because of the PlayStation's affordable price, and how smooth it looked, Tekken would soon become a household name. The 4 face buttons on the PlayStation's controller were a perfect fit for the game's 4-limb control setup. Tekken proved that 3D fighting games weren't a fad, but the future. Harada made an oath to his fellow team members that Namco's fighting games would become #1, even if it took them a decade.
Pick up a six-pack, you idiot!
With Tekken's success in the home game market, Namco had to strike while the iron was hot. Tekken 2 was released in arcades in 1995. While it still had a difficult time in arcades, it improved on the original with better graphics, improved gameplay mechanics, and a time-release character function which expanded the game's playability. Like its predecessor, Tekken 2 did much better when it came to the PlayStation in 1996. It sold 5.7 million units worldwide, 5 times more than the last entry. It was also the first game in which Harada's name was in the end credits. He voiced Yoshimitsu in Law in the first 2 games and in future titles. Things were looking up for Namco's fighting games. As history has shown us, Katsuhiro Harada was destined for much greater things. As the 21st century was approaching, the video game industry was changing. No longer were they seen as mere children's toys, as their evolution both reflected how far technology had come and how the taste of gamers was maturing. Tekken's first 2 entries did well on console, but the next entry in the series would have to subvert people's expectations and reflect the growth of the industry. Harada was assigned as the co-director of this next entry. He would now be responsible for how the game would look, sound, and feel. Since mainstream global culture changed so much, one of the first things Tekken needed to do was to deliver character designs that would be welcomed by a modern audience. While developing art for the game, the team came up with a few designs that would stand out from how characters in previous games were portrayed. A few examples were a Mishima-style karate practitioner with a tattoo and flame pants, a taekwondo student sporting biker gear, and a capoeira fighter from Brazil. These designs would manifest in the characters of Jin Kazama, Howrong, and Eddie Gordo respectively. The roster of characters would be a blend of both old and new, resulting in something that would attract new players. Tekken 3 was released in arcades in 1997. It took place 19 years after the end of Tekken 2's story. Most of the returning characters would be aged up to reflect the passage of time. Players could now sidestep on opposite sides, leaving room for more strategic gameplay. A new reversal system was implemented, meaning that the player would have to add more variety in their playstyle to avoid getting punished. Other additions included more realistic jump heights, shorter recovery times from knockdowns, and improved combo juggling. Everything Harada observed during the development of the previous games, he sought to improve upon. One important thing that his team did was observe the frame data of each move and take into consideration how every move would function. It was also the first game to have delayed input moves and input buffer. In an interview on the development of the game, he had this to say:
"We were motivated to completely overhaul the system mechanics and revamp the game from the ground up. There was also a collective urge to seriously reflect on the failings and shortcomings of Tekken 1 and 2, and worked with the thinking that Tekken 3 is the beginning of real Tekken. Actually, the game wasn't even titled 3 at first. We had another title. I wouldn't dare reveal that title now."
When the game was released on the PlayStation in 1998, it added exclusive features. There were 2 new modes called Tekken Force, a minigame modeled in the form of a beat-em-up, and Tekken Ball, which set players in a beach setting with rules similar to volleyball. It also had 2 exclusive characters, Dr. Boskanovich, a scientist with an unusual fighting style, and Gon, a guest character who originated from a manga of the same name. These features would prove to be a selling point for casual players looking to get the most out of their game. Tekken 3 would be a major success for Namco. Not only did the game do well in arcades, but it sold 8.36 million units on the PlayStation, making it the 5th best-selling game on the platform. This would solidify Harada's status as the godfather of Tekken. Not too long after, Tekken Tag Tournament would be released in arcades in 1999. This was a tag team game which featured every Tekken character in the series at the time. Since the arcade industry was beginning to struggle, Namco needed to push out an arcade title in a short amount of time. That's when Harada came up with the idea of a Tekken 3.5. He came up with the idea in 5 minutes, and the game was developed in a mere 2 months with a deadline of 3 months. The game would be featured as a launch title for the PlayStation 2, which featured improved graphics, and have an exclusive bowling minigame called Tekken Bowl. Though the game looked great for a PS2 game at the time, Harada knew that he could make something that looked vastly better. The massive success of Tekken 3 meant that a sequel was inevitable. Polygonal technology was rapidly improving, and the Tekken dev team could now produce games of higher visual quality. One of the team's objectives was to utilize their newest arcade hardware to its fullest. They also approached the development of their next game with player feedback in mind. They took their complaints into consideration and tried to produce something that would address them. This would result in Tekken 4. Tekken 4 was released in arcades in 2001 and on the PS2 the following year. The game would feature a more serious tone and have a focus on storytelling, which was uncommon for fighting games back then. Stages now had walls and obstacles throughout, which could be used for combo extensions and increased damage. Many of them had more urban settings, such as a shopping mall or a parking garage. To prevent cornering, the game had a switch maneuver, which would give players a fighting chance. The overall feel of the game was altered from Tekken Tag Tournament with stage interaction in mind. Sidestepping wasn't as viable as it was in previous games, and the ability to move backwards while crouching was taken away. Players could now move around the stage before the fight would begin. The combos were also toned down, making them the least effective of any Tekken game. A major complaint in the competitive scene was that quick jabs were favored over longer combos. Since characters like Steve Fox had quicker jabs than most of the characters, this would create balance issues. Jin Kazuma was the most overpowered character in the game and would be the most picked in tournaments as a result. Harada would later state that the team had misinterpreted user feedback as they took it too literally. This resulted in the game not being suitable for a competitive setting. Despite this, it was seen as the most ambitious game to date and received favorable reviews. This was yet another learning experience for Harada. Despite the setbacks of Tekken 4, the team's experiences would lay the foundation for the 5th entry in the series. Because of Tekken 4's criticisms and the pressure he and his team faced, Harada would soon leave Namco. His boss, believing in his ability to create quality titles, insisted that he stay with the company and direct the next Tekken game. Harada would have to take a hiatus for a year before he could begin anew. His main reason for returning was his love of fighting games. With Tekken's 10th anniversary approaching, he aimed to make the upcoming entry the best one yet. Learning from the mistakes made during the development of Tekken 4, Harada approached the next game with the concept of prioritizing fun above all else. Tekken 5 was released in arcades in 2004 and on the PlayStation 2 the following year. The game was designed to be faster and more fluid, harkening back to the days of classic Tekken. The game would also bring back infinite stages and characters who were absent from previous entries. Perhaps the biggest addition to the gameplay was the crush system, which would play a major role in how a character would be vulnerable while using a certain attack. Players could also customize their character's appearance by altering their colors or by giving them additional accessories. The game overall gave the player more freedom when it came to their playstyle and how they wanted to implement certain strategies. The game would be critically praised for its new additions and vast improvements over Tekken 4. It would later receive an expansion in the form of Dark Resurrection, which provided multiple balance changes, more customization options, new stages, and 3 new characters. It was released for the PlayStation Portable and the PlayStation 3 as a downloadable game. The latter port would later receive an online mode, a first for the series. Tekken 5 won fans over, both old and new, which would help get the series back on track. Harada would later serve as a producer for Tekken 6, which initially released in arcades in 2007. The game wouldn't come home until 2009 for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation Portable, and the Xbox 360, making it the first numbered game to appear on a non-Sony console. The game brought back all the characters from the last game and built upon its previously established features. It would introduce the Rage system, which allowed the player to deal more damage when their health bar reached a certain amount. The bound system would work as a combo extender, meaning that the player could continue their combo if the opponent was stunned upon hitting the ground. Overall, the game did well and helped continue to build Tekken's popularity. Now that Tekken was back in a favorable position, there is room for more ambitious ventures. With the growth of social media, anyone now had a chance to reach out to their fans. Harada joined Twitter in July of 2010. Through his Twitter presence, Harada has connected directly with fans, offering insights into game development, sharing announcements, and engaging in playful banter. Harada's use of Twitter not only showcases his dedication to transparency, but also highlights the evolving role of social media in shaping the gaming community and industry discourse. When he didn't post for a week, many of his fans wondered what happened to him. It was later revealed that he was doing fine and just needed to take some time off. He is also known to not take kindly to rude fans. He often reminds them not to ask him for anything as part of his public persona.
Bring back Lydia for Tekken 8!
Don't ask me who. Sharpen the shit to the head down! And don't ask me who. Okay? Don't ask me.
Whenever he's in the public eye, he's often accompanied by Michael Murray, who acts as a translator for him. He started as part of the localization team for Tekken 4, but would later go on to be a game designer for Tekken 6. Harada tends to have fun with his fans every now and then by doing things such as wearing a lifelike Heihachi mask and even dressing as him for various gaming events. It played a major role when he was promoting Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Something that many Tekken fans are aware of is the relationship between Katsuhiro Harada and former Street Fighter producer Yoshinori Ono. They had known each other since the early 2000s, but never spoke to each other until years later. Though the both of them were polar opposites and had different approaches to game development, that didn't stop them from working together with one another. One night when they were having dinner, they came up with the idea of a collaboration between their two franchises. Street Fighter Cross Tekken, a 2D game, would be revealed at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2010 and was released in 2012 for home consoles. Another title, Tekken Cross Street Fighter, would also be announced and was intended to be a 3D title. During those years, Harada and Ono collaborated with each other to promote their upcoming games. Harada would frequently wear sunglasses, which was requested by Capcom as part of their marketing ploy. This would make him be portrayed as the bad guy as opposed to Ono, who was acting as the good guy for promotional material. Ono was known for his silly public persona, which would translate over to the marketing for Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Harada and Ono would play tricks on one another, which horribly backfired in one instance. Around 2011, both of them were at Gamescom in Germany when Harada asked Ono which room he was in. Ono, infamous for trolling people, gave him the wrong room number. Harada would go on to place a sign on the door that said, "Please disturb," with cartoon excrement crudely drawn on it. Later that evening, Harada found out at a group dinner that it was the wrong room number. Both members from Namco and Capcom were thrown into a state of panic and scrambled to find out who the room belonged to. As it turned out, it belonged to a Microsoft executive, which exacerbated the situation. It was later removed, but it's unknown if the executive saw the drawing. Tekken Cross Street Fighter hasn't been talked about much since it was first announced in 2010. Many fans frequently ask if it'll ever be released. As of the release of this video, the only things that have been revealed are a render of Jin Kazuma and Ryu and some illustrations made by Tekken artist. Throughout the years, surveys have been posted to gauge fan interest in the project. Though the game isn't officially cancelled, Harada admitted that the project was only 30% complete and not much progress has been made. In 2023, during the Evolution Championship Series, Ono playfully asked about the status of the title, which would result in him being chased off the stage.
We had Tekken Cross.
Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out here!
With Tekken being back on top, it seemed natural to produce a title that celebrates everything that made the series great. Tekken Tag Tournament 2 was released for consoles in 2012, just 1 year after its original arcade release. Harada would once again act as a producer for the game. It played like a mix between the first tag game and recent Tekken titles. A new feature added was the Tag Assault, which utilized both of the player's characters. The balance system from Tekken 6 also makes a return. The player could choose to control either 2 characters or 1, depending on their preference. The game also allowed for up to 4 players to play simultaneously, so that 2v2 matches could be played locally. The game featured 59 playable characters, including 10 free downloadable fighters. For the first time in this series, characters would speak in their native languages. The Wii U version featured exclusive bonuses, including a mode featuring power-ups from the Super Mario series, costumes based on various Nintendo IPs, and the return of Tekken Ball. No matter what version the players chose, they were treated to an abundance of content. Despite all of this, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 failed to meet Bandai Namco's expectations. The game was expected to sell at least 1.7 million units, but only sold 1.5 million units by the end of March 2013. This was less than what the first Tekken game sold back in 1995. Some contributing factors to the game's commercial failure may have been due to lack of marketing, being released near the end of the 7th console generation, and how it came off as too complex compared to other games. Game development costs were rising during this time, so a game failing to meet its sales goal would be detrimental for the company. The Tekken series was now in jeopardy. If Harada couldn't release a game that would be profitable, it would mean the end of the fighting game giant that kick-started his career. Tekken Revolution was released as a free-to-play downloadable game exclusive to the PlayStation 3 in June of 2013 and was shut down in March of 2017. The game was similar to Tag 2 in many ways, but took away Bound and focused on 1v1 only. It featured critical arts, which gave some moves a chance of inflicting extra damage, and special arts, which gave other moves increased invulnerability and larger hitboxes. The game was criticized for its pay-to-play approach, but would lay the groundwork for the next Tekken game. When Tekken 7 was being made, it was going to be a turning point for the series in many ways. Not only would it be made on a tighter budget, but it would also be made in Unreal Engine 4. Unreal Engine 4 was seen as very powerful and easy to use. It would also prove to make porting the game to other platforms without any problems possible. As arcades were starting to fade away in Japan, the viability of an arcade release would be brought into question. When asked about the importance of Tekken in the modern arcade scene, Harada had this to say.
It is actually very important for our business model because it allows us to gain a certain amount of revenue, which is then used to create the console version, add in content, etc. It is also important to our fans because at the same time as funding this console version, it also ensures quality control. It is very important for Tekken still, but how long that will continue is hard to say, because of the state of the arcades.
Tekken 7 would be released in arcades in 2015 before seeing a home release 2 years later. It was also the first time a Tekken game would be made playable on PC. Harada would once again serve as director for this project. It went back to the basic one-on-one gameplay with mechanics in mind for beginner players. The Power Crush, influenced by Tekken Revolution, would allow the player to absorb attacks while they themselves are in the middle of attacking. The Rage Drive would allow the player to use an amplified version of an existing move, with less of a risk of being punished. Perhaps the biggest addition to the game was the Rage Art, a comeback mechanic which would trigger a cinematic cutscene in which the player could inflict 30% damage. There were also other ideas from previous and unreleased games that carried over to Tekken 7. Eliza, who appeared in Revolution, made a return along with her moveset, which featured her own projectile move. Akuma from the Street Fighter series is also featured as a guest character and retains his playstyle, which is now implemented in a 3D format. The game would feature DLC expansions containing more characters and stages, extending the game's longevity. There would be more guest characters, which would add variety to the game. These included Geese Howard from Fatal Fury, Noctis from the Final Fantasy series, and Negan from The Walking Dead.
You're gonna put me in the next update, right, Harada?
With more fighting games containing story modes, Tekken 7 had to deliver. The story mode would explain the background of the Mishima family and Kazuya's Devil Gene. Players would take control of numerous characters as the story unfolded. Those who weren't seasoned Tekken players also had the option of auto combos, allowing them to progress through the story with ease. Tekken Bowl would also make a return as DLC during the game's first season. It would go on to sell 11.8 million copies, making it the best-selling entry in the series. Harada once again proved that he could rise to the occasion and bring Tekken back from the brink of irrelevance. Tekken 7 would also bring the game into the world of esports. It would be featured as a main title in the Evolution Championship Series, the biggest competitive fighting game tournament in the world. It would also launch the Tekken World Tour in 2017, which has only grown since then. As of 2023, the prize pool of the finals was $100,000. This would be the perfect platform for pro Tekken players to get recognized and finally grow their scene into mainstream prominence. During the production of the game, Harada became the father of a baby girl. Though he spent many hours working at the office, he desired to spend as much time with his family as he could. His outlook on family changed once he became a family man. GameSpot interviewed him sometime before the console release and asked him about fatherhood and family. He used the Mishimas as an example.
They were throwing each other off cliffs and such. When you have a child, I already respected my family to a certain extent, But it makes it even deeper when you become a parent yourself and you realize what your parents went through when rearing you. I have an even deeper respect for my family, and parents in particular. To look at the Mishimas now, from that perspective, it's hard to imagine a family that bad.
Aside from Tekken, Harada is also assisted with many other games. He served as a producer for Pokken Tournament, a global marketing general manager for Dark Souls 3, and as an executive advisor for Soul Calibur 6. He even made an appearance as himself in Soul Calibur 5. In 2019, he was promoted to general manager and would be responsible for developing and producing many Bandai Namco titles. Harada's parents eventually found out about his career path and were devastated to the point of tears. However, they eventually came around and accepted it. In 2021, he opened a bar in Tokyo and used it as the setting for his own YouTube channel, aptly named Harada's Bar. He has various guests on his show to discuss a wide variety of topics with. Some notable guests include Ken Kutaragi, the father of the PlayStation, and Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of the Super Smash Bros. Series. As of this video, he currently has over 100,000 subscribers. On June 24th of 2024, Harada replied to a tweet regarding the direction Soul Calibur took as opposed to Tekken. His reply discusses the differences between Project Soul and Tekken Project, highlighting the impact of business model shifts in the gaming industry. The tweet emphasizes that evaluating game mechanics alone is insufficient for a game's survival, as successful marketing and branding are crucial. It underscores that games with excellent mechanics have still disappeared due to various factors, including organizational changes and the departure of key personnel. The tweet also recounts the rivalry between Project Soul and Tekken Project, knowing their different visions and development approaches. It mentions how Project Soul had strong leadership and technical expertise, but struggled due to company mergers and shifting priorities. In contrast, Tekken Project maintained its direction and survived by breaking organizational norms and maintaining independent decision-making. It concludes by expressing hope that the spirit of Project Soul persists despite organizational challenges. Harada acted as producer for the most recent title, Tekken 8. It's the first one to completely skip the arcades and head straight to the home versions. It was supposed to come out in 2021, but it wouldn't see a release until 2024 for various reasons. The game has a new system called Heat, which grants the player extra moves. This game is known to be the most offense-based Tekken yet, as it rewards players for playing aggressively. It sold 2 million copies within its first month, outpacing its predecessor. While the game has been well received, it unfortunately had some controversy along the way. Shortly after the announcement of DLC characters, microtransactions would be released for the game along with a battle pass. Many fans wouldn't take kindly to this, as they accused Bandai Namco of trying to get more money out of their customers after they paid $70 for the game. Harada would later go on Twitter to explain that game development costs are higher than ever and that the game could stop running if nothing was done. These choices may not have been made by Harada alone, as the higher-ups in the company may have mandated such choices. With gamers feeling alienated by AAA studios for their egregious business practices and the ever-growing costs of development, it's hard to expand the lifespan of a game in modern times. In June of 2024, it was reported that Bandai Namco Online was in a state of insolvency due to an 8.2 billion yen loss and a negative net income. Because of the underperformance of the free-to-play MMORPG Blue Protocol, it's proving detrimental to the company. Going back to what Harada previously stated, this could be part of the reason why Tekken 8 implemented microtransactions along with the Battle Pass. In March of 2024, Harada was asked about Tekken 9 on his show, Harada's Bar. He stated that Tekken 9 would likely be his final game before he would retire from the gaming industry. He would later explain that he would like to release it as soon as the PlayStation 6 and the new Xbox are released. With the PS5 nearing the end of its life cycle, the release of Tekken 9 may come sooner rather than later. Despite the setbacks of many of his projects, Katsuhiro Harada has never given up and has always pulled through during his most challenging times. He has given us excellent games that are beloved by gamers worldwide and are still talked about today. Whoever takes over the Tekken series after his retirement will have very big shoes to fill. No matter what he'll do in the future, his legacy as a pioneer and innovator will continue to shape the future of gaming, ensuring that his influence remains invaluable for many years to come.
ありがとうございました。
平八三島 is completely dead.